Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me, Kristen, your host on the So She Did podcast. I'm really, really excited about today's guest. If you've seen my social media, you've seen me post her a couple of times already because I'm joined today by Helene Brolund from Copenhagen, Denmark. And Helen is going to be talking about something that I've always wanted to talk to somebody about, but it's one of those things that's kind of uncomfortable as an adult. So Helen is a friendship coach. And she's going to be talking to us today about the need for adults to have friendships, how we build authentic connections, and how she coaches her clients in building those relationships. So, Helen, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, yes. So tell the listeners a little bit about your story and how you came to this profession of being a friendship coach.
Yeah. Oh, that's been quite a journey. I think there are definitely, it seems like there are definitely different ways that all that this way. One is that myself, I grew up really shy. I had a hard time creating friendships, but even as an adult, I learned to look successful, look like I had it all together, and never letting anyone in.
Yeah.
So I kind of had both sides of the shy girl, but also just knowing how to perform and look good, but honestly being lonely on the inside.
Right.
And so that led me also to have these amazing conversations with beautiful people around me, being a coach, being a mentor for the last 15 years, and just constantly hearing people asking questions and not having a language about friendships or even knowing how to address it or build them. So we had either the winners who could build friendships but didn't know what they did, or we had the losers who didn't and felt so shameful about it.
Right. So what you said really struck me, because this is something that I've struggled with probably my whole life, right? Is this idea that we have to look and be successful and act a certain way. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from a world that celebrates success as our image, as our achievements. Even back in school, we're taught that we get good grades. That has value. We're not taught that who we are and what we bring and our ability to love or our ability to show empathy is not what's being celebrated and rewarded. So I think it actually goes like we're just trained all through our lives to measure ourselves on our achievements. And that's what we show off. That's what and then we have the whole social media world where we also celebrate all our achievements. Because it's pretty hard to post hey, I was just so good at loving someone, or I just really received love. That's not the post that we bring, right?
Or the failures. You know, sometimes I see on social media, somebody will say, you know, please pray for me. Unspoken prayer request. They'll say that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, send good vibes my way. I'd rather keep it to myself. And so they're not sharing those, you know, the bad things, if you will, unless it's kind of a life event. But I think that for most people, especially when you talk about social media now, you see the good, you see the happy, you see the moments of celebration, the awards, the promotions, the kids graduating. You don't see the teenager that doesn't want to get out of bed in the morning that you're yelling at. You don't see, you know, the time you didn't, the 3 times that you didn't get the promotion before you got the promotion, and what you went through and recovering from that. So you don't see those things. You just see the celebrations. Why do you think, in addition to just this kind of social view of success, why do you think that we feel this need to share the good things when really, when we need the support the most is in the bad things? Why do you think?
Because we don't like to be vulnerable. Vulnerability makes us feel weak.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an important distinction. It makes us feel weak, where actually, in my opinion, vulnerability is one of the strongest character traits we have.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, vulnerability, that's reality, right?
Yeah. And it's harder. I think it's harder to be vulnerable. It's harder. It takes more strength and more courage to say, you know what, I'm not in a good place right now, than it does to say, look at me and look what I won and look at these celebrations, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it has a lot to do with we haven't learned how to actually celebrate this feeling, even the feeling of awkwardness as well. When we learn something new, it's like We tend to think that vulnerability, it doesn't feel good, so it must be wrong.
Yeah.
Instead of actually leaning into this, going, wow, celebrating, I'm actually leaning into who I am and all of who I am.
Right. And when we do that, then we can connect authentically with people.
Exactly.
So the first time you and I talked, we talked about this idea that it seems to be, I don't know if it is, but it seems to be harder to make friendships as an adult, because as kids, we don't have yet, the younger we are, these preconceived notions of who we are and who we are supposed to be. And I think I shared with you that some of my closest friendships are people that I've known since childhood. Because they know how I grew up, they know where I've come from, they've seen the good, they've seen the bad, and so there's no hiding that. Whereas when we make adult friendships, there always seems to be this surface level when you first meet somebody, and the only word I can use to describe it is fake. So, why do you think it's harder as adults than it was as kids?
I think there's so many layers to that. I think you point to a beautiful one about who we like to pretend we are, or who we would like to perceive as who we are, letting go of that. I think there are just the fact that it takes time to create friendships. That's why we often have friends from our youth, because the amount of hours it takes to actually form deep, authentic friendships, we are talking like 200 hours.
Yeah.
Studies show that it takes a long time, and it actually also matters what you do.
Right.
And allocating those resources, that time in our life, can be harder. And also, I think we think that when you grow up, and as an adult, I'm supposed to be able to be self-dependent.
Yeah.
I have to be able to take care of myself, or at least my partner should be enough.
I do think that, yes. I think that there's a lot of that.
Yeah. And so we lose the value of friendships. We forget how crucial they actually are to our health and our mental health, and how long we live, actually, studies show as well.
Yeah. And if we look at before this kind of age that we live in now with technology and, all of that, people did live in tighter knit communities. They worked together, they lived together. And I think, transportation, it was probably the first kind of advance, if you will, that pushed people apart, because now you can live farther away and drive to see each other. But then you lose that, I'm not friends with my neighbor. I'm not, my sister lives across town as opposed to down the street. Your kids, your sister's kids live in a different city, so the cousins aren't growing up together anymore, that kind of thing. And you lose the friendships because people are more spread out. I think that that's had a lot of impact on it, but we forget that we are social creatures. We are social species. We are designed to live and work and communicate together.
Exactly.
So, one of the things, and I just mentioned communicate, that you mentioned to me the first time we talked, is that we don't have the language for friendships. So talk to me about that a little bit.
When I talk to people about friendships, it's often first we start talking about, okay, yeah, friendship. Yeah, closer friendships can be hard. And then I ask them, so what is hard about it? And then it just becomes quiet.
Yeah.
Because we don't even have a language for what is actually hard about it. So we can even start there, like, what are the factors in place? What are the mistakes we make? What are the skills that we need to create friendships? And I think also because we have a myth that friendships is something it's supposed to happen when we're around people, even like when we're kids.
Right.
And we go into the schoolyard and we find someone to play with, and then we're friends, right?
Yeah.
And we don't develop our language and our understanding of how friendships can and will be formed as adults. Like, everything else changes, but we don't change our narrative around friendships. So even developing a language can also be really shameful for people, because if I'm one of the people who can't create friendships, there must be something wrong with me, because it seems to happen naturally to everybody else.
Right.
Which, of course, is a lie, because no great, deep, meaningful connection ever happens without effort.
Yeah.
It just so people get caught even in shame, stopping them from talking about it. So even developing a language is a process you need to go through.
Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier on the show that when you were growing up, you were shy.
Yeah,
So, do
very.
you think there's a difference in the way that introverted and extroverted people make friendships? Because I, for example, and I know you study the personality types, I'm an INTJ.
Yeah.
So, how do you think that means? What does that mean for me in terms of making friendships?
I'm not quite at home in the Myers-Briggs. I'm at home in the enneagram
Okay.
more.
Okay.
But the I is that's the introverted, right?
Introverted. Yeah.
Yes. I definitely think there is a difference of the challenges you have.
Yeah.
And how you can form friendships, because a lot of more extroverted people, they're drawn to socialize more and might learn that, where introverted are driven less to socialize.
Right.
So the whole social skill part is definitely, it's a good tool when you want to build friendships to have social skills, right?
Yeah.
But then when you move on from there, it seems that everybody struggle with taking the next step as well. Where sometimes, because there's a tendency, and again, I speak in softer terms because I don't want to cut people into cookie cutters.
Right.
But some introverts tends to think more about things and might even be more aware of their own emotional life because they spend more time with themselves.
Yeah.
So taking the next step in a friendship might be easier because having a great friendship is about sharing who you are.
Right.
Where extroverted can be more caught up in everything that's going on, everything that's happening. So I actually have to learn the skill of figuring out what's going on with me, who am I, and then actually start communicating that in a friendship.
I think on my enneagram, I am a 3, which is an achiever.
Yep.
I think
then we resonate the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I am. And so sometimes I think the block for me is, I want a relationship, but it takes time and energy to build a friendship. And, my natural tendency is to want to achieve and grow and build, and slowing down to build authentic connections is a challenge for me. So usually, my closest friends that I've made as adults are people who have reached out to me. And it's funny, one of my best girlfriends that I've met as an adult was I moved from one state to another here in the United States. And after work, I was having a really stressful day, and I went to this mom's group and I just posted, "Hey, does anybody want to go out tonight?" Which is the antithesis of my personality. Okay. Usually I go home and I get a book and I, read and write a book or whatever and fall asleep. And somebody replied, "Absolutely. I'm having a drink out here. Do you want to come meet me?" And so I show up at this, it was like a sports bar, and we had nachos and a beer together, and spent the rest of the night talking and getting to know each other. And that was really just, sometimes I say it was a universe thing because we did connect so good. But it's funny because, here I am, I'm this corporate person who goes home and reads book and studies and all of that. And she was a stay-at-home mom who used to be in healthcare but isn't anymore, very laid back, very opposite personalities. But I went into this like, I'm bored and I don't know anybody. I need a friend. Friend. It was a real authentic connection because I was so thirsty, if you will, for connection and friendship, living in this new place where I knew nobody, that as soon as I put myself out there, somebody responded and said, "Here I am. I'll be your friend." So what have you seen with your clients or with yourself in terms of just reaching out to people like that, putting ourselves out there?
Yeah, well, so many people respond so well to that.
Yeah.
Somebody has, like, for myself and for my clients, when you start like saying to someone, "Hey, I want a friend," or even communicated, "I think we're friendship dating and I like it."
Yeah, that's cute. How cute is that?
I was like, and even my husband does this as well. So it's not only for the ladies. I know we're talking to the ladies here, but that is and just putting yourself out there. But it's also because there's actually a lot more loneliness hiding in the corners that we are aware of.
Right.
And when we look at statistics, loneliness has increased over this pandemic. And I know in the States, there's 36% of adults who say they're serious lonely. It's actually,
I believe it. I believe
yeah.
it. Mm-hmm.
So chances are you're right next to someone.
Yeah. Do you think the pandemic made it worse for people?
Definitely some people, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I've heard both stories,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Because especially from the more introverted who really enjoy these close-knit friendships, some of
Yeah.
them say I've gotten so much better friends. Or even for some it's been a connection of vulnerability. Oh, we're both struggling. And
Yeah.
stop pressing each other by our strength and actually connecting around our vulnerability.
Yeah. I think in my experience, both personally and from the people that I've talked to, the pandemic had both effects, to your point.
Yeah.
So I think that, a lot of us spent more time at home alone. And so there was the added benefit of now we've got time to be introspective. We've got time to analyze where we are, what we really want. And we're seeing, it's really interesting here in the States, at least, we're seeing this shift in the workplace for people saying, you know what? I don't want to drive an hour to work every day and an hour home and work 9 hours. I enjoyed being at home, and I was just as, if not more productive that way. But I think at the same time, it's allowed people to have this reflection on, am I connected with the right people? Do I have healthy relationships? Those kinds of things. And to your point, now we all have this shared experience. And here in Denmark, I'm in Colorado in the United States, and there's this similar need, right? It's a human need to connect with other people. One of the things we didn't talk about before, but it just occurred to me when you mentioned your husband. What about couple friends? What about friends that you and your spouse hang out with together? How do we build those relationships? Because I'm in a relatively new relationship, and it's something I would like. He has his friends, I have my friends. But how do we build kind of communities, if you will, of friendships?
That's a really good question. I don't think I haven't worked. I've talked to couples about how to build friendships and what they want in friendships. And I think it's important that you have the conversation. What kind of friends do you enjoy? What kind of friends do I enjoy? What do we want?
Right.
And especially as adults, when we come into a relationship, we have our own opinions. We have our own kind of people.
Right.
So I think it's important to actually put that on the table as everything else in a relationship. And then see where can we then find that kind of people, because you might be drawn to some people and your partner might be drawn to some totally different kinds of people.
And I like that approach of being intentional and talking about it. I mean, we talk about finances, we talk about communication, we talk about, all different aspects of the relationship. I think friendship should be part of that discussion as well. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Also because your relationship will only be stronger and more get through crisis better if you have friends close that can actually support you and sometimes be the one you go out with instead of your husband, or your wife, because we can't fill all each other's needs, can we?
We can't. And it's not fair to expect somebody to meet all of your needs, or even to meet all of your social needs. And I think that you kind of mentioned this or alluded to this earlier in the conversation. Sometimes we think that our spouse or our significant other is going to meet all of those social needs for us. That's a big burden to put on somebody else. That's a big burden, and it's very unfair,
Yeah, definitely.
So in your practice, when people come to you for friendship coaching, what are some of the consequences in their lives that you see of them not having good friendships? What does that look like?
Well, it often looks like feeling disconnected, feeling sad, feeling unhappy. A lot of people won't come to me and say, I'm lonely. They will say, I feel unfulfilled. I feel like I'm missing something. And living their lives not feeling fulfilled.
Right.
There's this itch. And some people will go, I tried, like some people, I'm busy. I'm always surrounded by people, but there's still this uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
This awkward feeling. And because we don't have a language, and because loneliness is also very much attached to shame, it's not something we don't want to put that label on us. We don't, that's not the words that people use. But sadness, or not feeling like reaching out, or feeling, I don't feel like myself, those are some of the consequences that it has. But also just I don't have anyone to go to the movies with. I don't have anyone to go traveling with. I don't have anyone to talk to when life hurts.
Right.
So I kind of end up just alone, just me.
Yeah.
I had one of the women that we have in our practice. She said, I realized that once my parents die, I'm going to be very much alone. She's single. So it's, and we do have several single people in our practice as well. Just because you need your friends when you don't have that significant other in a different way.
And I think, we have these superficial surface level, if you will, connections with people.
Yeah.
So you started this by saying some people come to you and they say they're around people all the time. You get up, you go to work, and there's people all around. You go pick up the kids, and there's all the moms and dads waiting there.
Yeah.
You go to, a church group or a sporting event or whatever, and there's people all around. But that's not really friendship. Those are kind of acquaintances and that surface level. So how do we reach out to those people and start to build deeper connections? What does that look like?
Yeah, I love how you put that. I just want to point out that contact is not connection.
Yeah.
I think that's so important to remember. Contact with people is not connection.
Right.
And I think we can start many different places. If you want to try to be more open to conversation, then start developing habits in your life where you go to the same gym at the same time, or you go for a walk with your dog on the same time. I see this on the street in Copenhagen. I'm looking down at a dog park, actually.
Yeah.
And I can tell that people have met each other. And now they meet every morning at 7 o'clock and talk.
Yeah.
Just this whole forming, because when you get familiar, you're more likely to initiate conversations. And of course, those goes deeper.
Yeah.
But I think one of the big factors are to master the art of conversation.
Okay.
To actually become better at having good conversations, because we have so many conversations in our lives.
We do.
And I don't know about you, but oh my God, I've had so many conversations about the pandemic.
Yes.
When nothing new has been shared.
Yes.
Yes. It's just like, I'm just repeating myself and you're repeating yourself from another conversation. So we're not really connecting. We're in contact with each other, but we're not connecting.
Right.
So leaning into our conversations about being more intentional about our questions.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples is when we meet someone new, we ask them, so what do you do?
Yes.
And I'm like, what are we, human doings? No, we're human beings. So could we talk about who they are rather than what they do?
I love that. I love that. And I have to tell you that I'm struggling with that. And this is me being vulnerable for both you and the listeners now. I'm struggling with that right now because I have always had this corporate career. I was an executive for a public home builder for years and years and years, and just recently left the corporate world. And I'm focusing on coaching and I'm focusing on podcasting.
Congratulations.
Luckily, I'm in a place where I can do that. And it's so awkward to me because it used to, when I would go to dinner with people, oh, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm the vice president of such and such, which is the largest company here. And, this is how many employees I have. And this is how much revenue I oversee. I could tick off a resume like that. And now I feel a little awkward when somebody asks me, what do you do? And it's funny because now I still reference, I say, well, I used to be an executive at home building. And now I'm working on trying to find out what my next step is. And it's a very awkward place for me. It doesn't seem to be awkward for them. But before I go out to dinner, I practice my answer because I know somebody's going to ask me. And my personal worth has been so tied up in my career and what I do for a living that I'm having to work my way out of, that this is my identity. And to your point, we're human beings, not human doings. And I love that. It's not what I do for a living. It's who I am. It's who I want to impact. It's messages like this, talking with people like you across the world. This is what I'm doing, Yeah. So
that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yes, and thank you for the message. Human beings, not human doings. So for any of our listeners hearing this right now, if you're struggling with, I am just this, I'm just starting my career, I'm just a stay-at-home dad, I'm just a student, you're not just. who are you and what do you have to offer to friendships and to connection and to the world? You know? So when somebody asks that question, how can we answer in a way that's not career focused? Any ideas? I know it's a tough question.
No, I think you are on to something. You said something that I really like. I prepare.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to stop and think about it, because I've been in the same situation. Like, yes, I do human resource development, I do this. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm in a process of figuring out what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think we can connect to our values. When people say, what do you do? Then keep the answer short.
Yeah.
And then turn the conversation to a question that you find is more interesting. Because honoring people and being like, okay, this is what I do. And then turn the question around to something that is more interesting, like what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
What is important in their lives now? What makes them happy?
Yeah.
And if you get stuck in that, so if you just kind of let yourself run, go, so what do you do? Then having prepared the questions, going, so why is that interesting to you? What are you passionate about in that? What is how does that fulfill you to do that?
Yeah. I love that. Why is that interesting to you? I love that question.
So
and the second part of that, how does that fulfill a need in you? Because maybe then you get into a deeper conversation where in fact it does not. Because back when I, and this was just a couple of months ago that I left. But when I was doing that, if somebody had asked, how does that fulfill a need in you? Maybe I would have left sooner, Maybe I would have. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's how we introduce each other. I noticed the other day I was sitting at dinner and that's how somebody introduced me. And it's kind of funny because that's, again, to your point, not my identity.
And I even think just start talking about that. Like, how do we introduce each other?
Yeah.
Just in a kind way. Like, I would love to be introduced like this when you introduce me to people, because I want to have more real conversations. I want to be curious. I want to ask questions. I want to share, of course, whoever you are, appropriate amounts of vulnerability or just realness and authenticity in conversations.
Right.
That's how we get closer to each other.
And I have found that when I am vulnerable with people in conversations, it encourages their vulnerability in return.
Totally.
So when you open up and you say, I'm really struggling with what it is I want to do next, all of a sudden the table, everybody turns and looks at you and is like, oh, me too. And then you do have these really more intentional, authentic conversations. And you start opening up, how am I going to do this while I balance, my children or my hobbies, or I really love to travel, but I need to focus on this and I'm struggling with balancing that. What are you doing? And then you can really have great conversations with perfect strangers, strangers.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important thing, as well as valuing the really, really good conversations we can have with our acquaintances. They don't need to be small talk conversations.
Right.
And as soon as we start investing in that, it's easier to take people to the next step. Like have these, like you people you just got to meet, acquaintances, like someone that you talk a little bit with, close friends, and then you kind of have these levels.
Yeah.
But if we value and actually put effort into the conversations on all levels, first of all, they can nurture us.
Right.
But also they open the doors to actually move people if that's what we want and need.
Yeah. And I think that it does then yield to deeper, better connection, because at that point, somebody will say, how can I get in touch with you? Or, hey, share with me your Instagram, or, those kinds of things. And then you do start to connect with people. And I've also found that I build, sometimes I won't call it a friendship, but short-term connections with people, in line at the grocery store or walking through the mall, whatever. And one of the ways I found to do that is when you see something that you admire in somebody, even if they're a complete stranger, calling it out, like, what, I just want to let you know that your hair looks fantastic, those kinds of things. And it's funny because my boyfriend does this when he sees guys in parking lots with amazing cars. And then before I know it, they're standing there striking up this whole conversation. And I feel like, when I leave those interactions, you made somebody's day. You made somebody somebody's day and you recognize the effort that they put into choosing this car or, doing their hair, or, oh my gosh, look how adorable your kids are today. And, just those kinds of things, or you look so put together, just, whatever it is, I think that recognizing people for those things helps open the door for them to connect with somebody. And it makes you much more comfortable talking to people too. And nobody's going to turn away a compliment.
No.
Nobody.
And I love that because it's also a great way if you want to practice talking to people. Like it is so low commitment to talk to someone in the supermarket.
Yes.
And so you can practice.
Right.
And of course, when we lean into asking questions in a different way, or talking to people in a different way, or listening deeper and not, I love the quote that you can get more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in people than you can in 2 years by trying to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But when you turn that around in our world, it can feel vulnerable. It can feel awkward. You're trying to do something new and express yourself in the new way. And I love how you just take it out into the playground of all the different people we meet.
Yes.
And then it doesn't have to be so serious.
It doesn't.
And all of a sudden, because just about out of your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable. That's how we grow.
And I think it's really good for our mindset when we start looking for good in people. So even if you're not ready to talk to a complete stranger and throw out a compliment yet, I think it's really good for our mindset to, you know what, I may not talk to somebody today, but I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to go to the park or whatever it is. And I'm going to look for good in people. I'm going to look for an opportunity to at least offer a compliment to them inside of me. And then you start to recognize the good in people, and it makes you want to connect with them more. And it also helps you see the good in yourself.
Yeah.
You
know, and it also can help you to be less judgmental.
For sure. For sure.
And we all, and like being judgmental is not something you can turn off and on. So if we want these deep, fulfilling friendships, they have to be non-judgmental. It kind of comes with the territory, right?
Absolutely.
But so when we start looking for good in everybody, it just helps us to be less judgmental in all of our interactions. And that actually builds a good skill to create deeper friendships as well.
So we've talked about kind of these surface levels. How do you meet people? How do you start a conversation? But I know that one of the things that the platforms that you stand on is that for true connection, true friendship, we have to know what our own core values are. And we have to kind of share those with the people that we're intimate with in our lives in terms of friendships and deep connection. So what is that? What does that mean? And what does that look like?
I think it means stopping and looking at your life and becoming aware of what is actually important to me. I think one of the tools I love about who my core values are, or even who I am, is talking about the enneagram, talking about personality. It gives us language, who we are, we can communicate with other people. It's all about like priorities. I have my clients go through that. So these are a list of values. What are your core values and how do they express themselves in your life? Right. But then I have them look at the calendar and I go, does that match?
Yeah.
Or I have them look at their bank account and go, does that match? Do you actually live what you say? But when we become better at actually figuring out what's important to us, what makes us smile, what makes us passionate. I shared with you earlier that if I were to move to a new city, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm someone who wants to change the world, and I go to church. So the more of those areas that I could cover when I go look for friendships, the better I could actually meet friends, but also talk to people about what's important to me.
Right. And one of the things, you just said, and I've done an activity because I coach people, but I work with a coach. And one of the very first activities that she had me do was uncovering what are my core values. And, I wrote them on my whiteboard in my office, and two of them, and it just occurred to me about this, were challenge. I like to be challenged, and I like authenticity. So in thinking about the friend that I told you that I made at the spur of the moment, that's become a very dear friend of mine, one of the things that I love about her is she's incredibly real. You never have to know what she thinks about anything. If she's stressed out, if she thinks I'm making a mistake, she will challenge me. Kristen, why are you doing that? And so looking at it from that perspective, she does offer a challenge, and she is very authentic. And so that does align with my core values, even though, as I said, we live very different lives. But those core values are in place. And I do think that, we'll be long-term friends because of that shared approach to life, if you will,
Yeah, definitely. And also the fact that you can celebrate the differences, I think. When I listen to it, I think that's something that can be really hard for me, is when and that's something I had to learn, is to celebrate when people are different from me and really just enjoy, wow, you can even live your life like that and be happy and fulfilled and be inspired by that.
Yes, be inspired by that, for sure.
Yeah.
And she does inspire me. Again, very different lives, very different career paths, all of that. But her realness inspires me. And she's somebody that when I have had a bad day, if I, one of those days where you wake up and you don't want to take a shower, you want to leave your pajamas on all day, the house is a mess, the kids, those days, right?
Yes.
The Amazon man is knocking on the door. So is the mailman, because you haven't checked the mail and the box is overflowing and you don't have any groceries in the house.
You just want to cry, basically.
Right. On those days, she is a person, one of the very few people in my life that I feel like I could literally knock on her door, show up, sit on the couch and be like, I need a friend.
I'm a mess.
I'm a mess. And she'd be like, I got you. And there was one night, maybe a year or so ago, when I called her and I was upset about something. I kid you not, 15 minutes later, she showed up in my house. And I won't say at my door, because she just walks in my house. That's how our relationship is, with a bottle of wine. And she was like, I'm here for you. What do you need?
You are now feeling out a little bit. Yes. Are you there?
Great. Yes, I'm here. Did you get it? Okay.
No, I didn't.
I said she's somebody who, I called her once in the middle of the night about a year ago, and, was just stressed having one of those nights. She showed up in my house, not on my doorstep, in my house about 15 minutes later with a bottle of wine and said, I'm here. What do you need? And, for her, I've told her the same thing, no matter, she just recently had a baby, no matter what time of day, no matter what's going on, if you need anything, call me and I will be there. So,
I love that. I think it's one of the things we have to practice as well, especially in a culture of being strong, independent women, is to ask for help and to actually reach out. And it's one of the things that I know I had to learn so the hard way, that if we wait and only ask for help when we really, really need it, it's just really a lot harder to ask for help, because we haven't practiced, we haven't developed that and nurtured that in our friendships.
Well, and by then it's too late.
Yes, it is.
If you had gotten help earlier, if you had made connection earlier, and if you had provided help earlier, I think it's just one of those things, being aware of other people, being aware of ourselves, and saying, hey, I'm vulnerable, you're vulnerable, let's connect. And it doesn't always have to be in the bad things. It's nice to have somebody there to hold your hand and celebrate with you, to your point, to say, you know what? I just want to go to the movies tonight. Let's go, and have that friend that'll do that with you.
Yeah. I love that. It's too late when you're already out there. It's just, you can't ask for help anymore. So you have to do it in the seasons where it would be nice to have help, but you want to develop the helping relationship as well. Or you give help when you have the energy to do it.
Yeah. And then I think that, part of it too is being honest, right? It's saying, I would like to get to know you more as a friend. I'd like to develop this friendship a little bit further. Can we spend more time together, Or I know that both you and I are busy, and it'd probably be great for both of us to have a good friend. Would you like to go to brunch?
Yes.
Those kinds of things,
That conversation, we have, all our clients have that conversation with their friends.
Yeah.
Because it helps you. Like, if you get rejected there, that's not a nice situation.
Right.
But the rejection there, or you've been trying to build a friendship for a year and it doesn't work, then the rejection or the hurt in that is so much larger. So you actually get off on a good start when you start talking about your friendship. And it makes it easier to talk about, so what is support for you? What is, even having these conversations, what is trust for you? What is support for you? What is vulnerable to you? And I loved you framed that earlier, was this is me being vulnerable for you and for the listeners, because we tend to think that people can guess that what I'm sharing right now is vulnerable. But vulnerability to you and vulnerability to me can be two very different things.
It can. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of my big things is sharing what I need from someone, whereas sharing my inner processes and my thoughts is not very vulnerable. But asking for help, oh, that is vulnerable for me.
Yeah. And I think being vulnerable about your wins is important too. You know what? It's really, this is me being really vulnerable, but I worked hard and I'm really proud about this. I would like it if you could celebrate this with me, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Having, you're in the entrepreneurial business as well, like celebrating and actually putting our babies out there.
Yeah.
Is very vulnerable, but also just so fulfilling. And we need people to share the wins with us, definitely.
Share the wins and sometimes share the efforts and just say, you know what, I need somebody to acknowledge me right now for these efforts that I'm making. Would you like to, come over for dinner and let's celebrate tonight, or come eat some chocolate cake with me because, I did something today that was out of my comfort zone and I'm really proud of myself. So
yes, definitely. That is part of the friendships as well.
It is, right? Celebrating those things. Yeah. So what are some tangible things that listeners can do if they're in this place now where they feel isolated, they feel like they don't have connection, 2 or 3 things that somebody could do today to start building connection with people?
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier the whole thing about building habits in your life where you start connecting with people when you want to meet people. Right. Another thing is looking at your core values and thinking, where can I meet people who have some similar core values? Because you can meet friends everywhere, but you might have to meet fewer people if you go for the people where you share the core values.
Right.
And then start preparing questions you want to ask next time you interact with the moms at the school or people in the fitness center, or even preparing questions for the cashier in the supermarket. Start thinking about, how could I actually interact with someone and reach out? How can I ask more interesting questions? Those would be some very tangible things. And also think about, are there people that are super connectors in my life that I could reach out to and go, I know you're really connected. Is something going on that I could come with you to?
Oh, great idea. Great idea.
You get access to their network.
Great idea.
And get out there.
And I think that, the value, and I hear you saying this, of working with a coach, somebody like you to help you through this, because it's one thing to say, you know what, come up with some openers or ways that you can start conversations. It's something completely different to have that accountability person to say, okay, last week you committed to connecting to 5 new people. How many people did you connect with? How did that feel to you? What's working, what's not working, and to have somebody unbiased who's on your team, who supports you and believes in you to encourage you through that,
Definitely. Yeah, because I think that's what we miss is, I definitely believe there are some skills that we can learn. We work with a skill set, like 5 skills that you learn. Yes. But then there's all the awkwardness, there's all the vulnerability, there's all the emotional reactions to doing these things.
Yes.
And that's where you need the coach to, work through it.
Right. So tell me, what's your big message for our listeners today? Going away from this show, walking away, if they heard one thing, what's your big message for them?
Think that if you really want a happy, fulfilled life, then friendships is a need to have and not a nice to have.
Yeah.
If you go with one thing, friendships is worth your effort.
Friendships are
going to give you what you want in life in the end.
Yes. Friendships are a need, not a nice to have. There's something that we need. I love it. Great. So how can the listeners get in touch with you? You
can connect with me on Instagram, on our Simon and Helene, Helene. I know it's a Danish name.
Uh-huh.
You can find us there. And you can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search for my name, Helene Brolund, and connect with me there. And I'll point you also to we have a Facebook group where we do weekly live trainings for free on all the different friendship skills you need. It's called the Authentic Friendship Network.
Mm-hmm.
Jump there and connect with us. Let's talk about these. We'd love to help you take your next step.
Okay. Can you repeat? You broke up a little bit right there. Can you repeat the Facebook group? You said you have weekly trainings.
We have free weekly trainings on all the skills you need and the mindset shifts and the conversations you need to have in friendships to build these amazing friendships that you long for. So we'd love to support you. Jump into that group.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I know we're in completely different time zones, completely different years, but again, I think that's just a testament to how important friendships are. Thank you so much for reminding us that having friendships, having social connections are not something that are nice to have. They absolutely are a need, and that we should make them a priority and learn to connect with people, learn how to build conversations, because those surface level conversations can become something deeper that fulfills a need both for us and for our friends. So I think this is incredibly important work that you're doing, that not enough people really look into doing this work and helping people build connection. Very often you see coaches that are working on, the inside and what is it that I am going to do. Yeah. But we as humans are we creatures. And so helping people build that connection, I think, is so powerful. And, the pandemic was a reminder to us of that, but it's something that's always been there. It's not something new. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your expertise, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for letting me. It's been an absolute honor to be here.
Good. Great. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.